It's a great privilege to be talking at the first Normal Labour and Birth Conference in India 2020. So as I said, I'm in New Zealand. New Zealand is quite a bit of a distance away from Australia. We are now going into the summer. I'm in Auckland, the biggest populated area right up on the North Island. There's a picture of one of the suburbs in Auckland where I live, and that's a picture of the Sky Tower overlooking the harbour. And the last picture is a picture of some students on the campus where I work on the North Shore of AUT University. In this presentation, some of the areas that I'm going to look at and examine are listed there for you, just to give you a bit of guidance and signposting of where we're going to go. I'm not going to go in the strict lineup of what they say there. I'll weave in and out of these topics. So we start with the notion of safeguarding. In this context, safeguard in this context is more about the protection than sheltering. This is concerned with ensuring the specialness continues to be experienced. This speaks to the continuance, if you like, of the whisper and the singing of joy throughout all maternity organisations, and that this whisper or this song finds acceptability and welcome within all maternity care provider practices, whether they be midwives or obstetricians, in all situations and locations, whether that's at a home birth, a primary unit, or in a high-tech caesarean section situation. I'm reminded of the word of two authors that I still respect to this day, Crouch and Manderson, who said that birth is a unique and crucial social event, as well as a singularly important one for the persons concerned. And as a consequence, birth reflects salient cultural conditions and values within their own domain of meaning and reference. And I'm also reminded of a Māori midwife, what she said to me several years ago, when she said, birth is not just a medical event or a purely biological event. I don't believe and feel that it's solely up to us. There is this mystical going on. That's not always what I feel in that moment, but that feeling keeps me true to why I became a midwife. So there are definitely challenges, and we need to find bridges over those challenges. On one side, we have the dominant Western medicalization of childbirth that has a very strong safety and risk discourse playing out. And on the other side, we have deeply felt spiritual and existential experiences around the dimension of care that we provide that is meaningful and significant, often an aspect of childbirth that very rarely gets spoken about. For me, there's always this dance between the biomedical discourse, that which measures and controls and monitors, perhaps even limits or narrows a focus in this very highly technological age, with the potentialness of the ecstatic or even the chaotic or the incredibly dynamic processes of childbirth and the unpredictability. There's always a dance between the two, the Apollinean and the Dionysiac. Dance continues constantly at each birth within our maternity organisations. And how do we bridge that? Well, there's something about mood. The feel, mood or affectivity of an organisation is important. We are always in one mood or another in any situation that human beings find themselves working and living, and maternity organisations are no different. Mood in this context may or may not be an affective state. So what I'm pointing to in this presentation is the mood of an organisation. And this mood reflects how we are all faring, both individually and collectively. Have you felt a perceptible difference in the quality of space when you're at a birth? I would contend that it's a meaningful, significant space, and that we all work and live in places that opened into attuned spaces, especially at childbirth. Birthplace and birth spaces are crucial parts of what I name the ecology of birth, and this relates deeply and profoundly to our physiology and psychology. We are all touched by our environmental moods, and in these moods we either flourish or shrivel. Such organizational moods can open us either to possibilities or close down such possibilities. So taking this notion of organizational mood as our starting point, I suggest that there are moods of fear and anxiety that attune current maternity organizations. It is important that we acknowledge the power of such moods. In maternity organization, moods of fear, for example, can be destructive. Fear frequently attunes current maternity organisations, and this is problematic because how we attune reflects how we understand the situation of practice. For example, an organisation attuned to fear interprets childbirth as dangerous and risky. This understanding and interpretation then leads to actions prioritising risk-averse behaviour that may be covering up our interconnectedness and fragmenting the wholeness and existential specialness that I spoke of. In such circumstances, compassionate ways of being with one another get threatened and the possibility of soothing human interactions begin to suffer. Healthy relationships are made up of compassion, empathy, and emotional well-being can only flourish in organizations that honor this interconnectivity. The importance of how we attune is reflected in the professional sphere. We know professionally that there are issues around bullying, power issues, gender inequalities, lack of respect, and many practitioners feeling they're not seen or heard. These concerns also beset our obstetrician colleagues. The organizational and practice demands may be now stripping away our humanity, and we have to take action. There seems to be an increasingly impersonal picture at odds with the desire for adopting a more relational model of maternity care, a model of care focused on relationships that are tuned to the most intimate of human experience. So this drive towards more technocratic or even fragmented, task-orientated and impersonal services is actually contrary to the experience of childbirth and the very philosophy of midwifery. So for me, it is worrisome that in some reason there is a move away from human connection, which covers over these existential and spiritual qualities of childbirth. And if this mood continues, maternity care risks becoming mundane, fearful, anxiety-fulfilled, and exhausting, instead of fulfilling, spiritually energizing, and transformative. So how we attune to our daily practices absolutely matters, and how our maternity organizations function reflects how compassion and empathy flourish or not flourish. It's been emphasized that the culture and climate can be either positive or negative, and the positive forms associated with compassion and well-being, while the negative forms are associated with stress and even malpractice. Compassion is a quality or mood awaiting a fertile ground to awaken and grow. To deny this has repercussions not only for midwives, but also for our medical colleagues, resulting in poorer biomedical and psychosocial, emotional and spiritual outcomes for all involved. For staff members working in maternity to feel professionally and personally inspired by the care they provide requires further development, and this development is urgent. I did an international inquiry with colleagues around spirituality and childbirth, and I'm not going to go into the detail in this presentation, but draw your attention to how culture, relationships, meaning, and sense-making are important qualities that inform the overarching central theme of that inquiry, spiritual midwifing. The outcome of the inquiry showed that nurturing compassionate spaces informs practice and safeguards childbirth. What is becoming clearer, albeit may be very obvious to many of you listening, is that healthy relationships in maternity are made up of compassion, empathy, and emotional well-being. Yet for spiritual midwifing to occur and such relationships to be nurtured, an organizational culture needs to be supportive and culturally, psycho-spiritually, psychologically, and philosophically aligned. All these human elements need to thrive if childbirth specialness is to survive. So compassion deeply matters. Evidence exists to show that when management afford compassion, caregivers are more likely to deliver compassionate care to their service users. Building compassion also requires implementing models of maternity care so that relationships are the core of the changes. Maintaining the status quo is therefore not an option. The situation will only worsen and both staff and service users suffer. This diagram represents the end result of an integrated review that looked at the culture, the climate of maternity services, and how this may impact on potential for postnatal mood disorders. The evidence keeps pouring in that the mood of maternity organisations matter deeply. It is evident that there are many instances in hospitals today where organisational culture does not engender a conducive environment, where the challenges and unpredictability of childbirth is appreciated. When midwives and other maternity care workers become drained of their emotional reserves, working in such environments, the ongoing ability to provide compassionate care also diminishes, and this is sometimes called compassion fatigue. The expectation for midwives to cope and be resilient in what is often a harsh organisation environment does not allow staff to thrive. In other words, in such an environment, compassion and empathy are unable to flourish. But these moods are important because they are an objective group phenomenon that can be palpably sensed as one enters a party or a city and feels an attitude of gaiety or depression, openness or fear. As I said back in 2015, once the mood of an organisation shifts from one that narrows potential to one that opens to possibility, something enlightening between us awakens. A spark of compassion awakens. And once a spark of a potential flame awakens, it can be fanned into a roaring fire, warming and bringing brightness to all our encounters. I developed this model of the ecology of childbirth. This was looking particularly at the moment of birth, but equally that the wording in the center of this could be maternity organizations. And we can see that context and embodied experience, how we relate to each other, the nature of experience, time, mystery, as I've spoken, and the places and spaces in which all this occurs are all part of what brings joy to childbirth. And this mood is our shared joy of being alive, our shared natality. But it's about who and how we are, the choices we make, and how and what we do in the way we practice, and that we come with an openness and a reflexive mind. Compassionate organizations matter. We must ensure the organizational environment that staff are working is conducive to them being able to deliver compassionate care. Critically, this involves organizations fostering a culture of compassion. This necessitates the need for compassion towards each other, showing each other that our lives and contributions are of value. The expectation to be resilient in an organization does not promote psychosocial and spiritual well-being, and it's untenable, and I would say it is brutish. In such a toxic environment, compassion retreats into darkness, leaving fragmented and disconnected individuals surviving the demands imposed on them each day. Compassion, on the other hand, builds on the concept of empathy, and that there is similarly a recognition of the emotions of the other person. The difference here is that compassion also includes the motivation to act to alleviate the circumstances of the other. Rather than being only an emotional reaction, compassion arguably entails a relational decision to help another person. To deny this is to take staff to burnout, when the organizational environment, instead of nourishing the practitioner, merely depletes and exhausts them. When there is a lack of compassionate care, women and families become bereft of integration and become adrift in an impersonal, intimidating organizational process, like the integrated review that I just presented. Maintaining the status quo, as I said, is not an option. If you've answered no to any of these questions up on the board now, the situation will only worsen, and both staff and the service users, as I previously said, will suffer, because the expectation is to be resilient, and we need to move on from this. You need to take action if you've said no to any of these things. During COVID-19, the need to honour this quality of care provision is even more crucial. Attuning to fear will only exacerbate an already challenging global healthcare environment. Many of us, I know, practice compassion, and this is the very drive that ensures we deliver the best services to women, families, and community. And for this, I commend you all and remain proud to be a midwife in our global community. But we have challenges ahead, and not everyone everywhere gets to enjoy compassionate work and in childbirth, especially with a pandemic raging around us. So remembering the specialness and significance of childbirth amongst the challenge is vital, and being kind to ourselves and each other matters more than ever. There's some key references for you, but I'm going to leave it there today. And as I said at the beginning, I'm very happy to receive emails or Twitter messages. But I just want to say, please do take care of yourself and of each other, more now than ever before. Bye-bye.